On March 10, 1974, a Japanese soldier walked out of the Philippine jungle. He was wearing the uniform he had put on 30 years earlier. His rifle was clean, his sword was sharp, and he did not know that the Second World War had ended in 1945. Hiroo Onoda was born in 1922 in a rural Japanese village. He was educated, he was intelligent, he was chosen for something special. In 1944, at the age of 22, he entered the Futamata branch of the Nakano Military Intelligence Academy. Futamata trained a specific kind of officer, not regular soldiers, guerrilla warfare specialists. Men who could operate alone behind enemy lines, for years if necessary. In December 1944, Onoda was deployed to Lubang Island in the Philippines. The American army was advancing, the Japanese army was collapsing. Most soldiers were surrendering or dying. Onoda received a different assignment. His commanding officer, Major Taniguchi, gave him a single order. An order that would define the next 30 years of his life.
Whatever happens, we will come back for you. Until then, you must not die by your own hand. It may take 3 years, it may take 5 years, but we will come back for you.
Then Taniguchi left, and Onoda was alone with 3 other soldiers on a small tropical island. He would obey that order for 29 years. In August 1945, everything ended. Hiroshima, Nagasaki. The Emperor's surrender broadcast on radio for the first time in Japanese history. The war was over. The empire was defeated. Japan would be occupied for 7 years. None of this reached the jungle of Lubang. Onoda and his 3 men were still on patrol, still watching for American landings, still waiting for orders that would never come. In September 1945, aircraft flew over Lubang and dropped leaflets. The leaflets contained the surrender order of Emperor Hirohito, translated into Japanese, calling all remaining soldiers to lay down their arms. Onoda picked one up, read it carefully, and rejected it. The date seemed wrong. The grammar had irregularities. The phrasing was strange. For an intelligence officer, the conclusion was obvious: enemy propaganda. He burned the leaflet and continued his war. The years passed, then the decades. Onoda and his men built shelters in the jungle. They hunted local cattle for food. They repaired their uniforms with jungle plants and stolen materials. They maintained their weapons with obsessive precision. Onoda's rifle never rusted, not once in 29 years. But they were not just surviving, they were fighting. They attacked Filipino farmers, believing them to be American collaborators. They killed police officers, believing them to be enemy soldiers. They burned crops, believing they were destroying enemy supplies. Over the course of the Ghost War, Onoda's group killed approximately 30 Filipino civilians and wounded over 100 more. These were not soldiers. They were farmers, mothers, children, people who had never even seen a Japanese uniform before. One by one, his men left him. Akatsu surrendered in 1949. He simply walked out of the jungle one day and gave himself up to Filipino authorities. Shimada was killed in a firefight with a Filipino search party in 1954. Kozuka was killed by Filipino police in 1972. By 1972, Onoda was alone. He was 50 years old. He had been at war for 28 years, and still, he did not surrender. While Onoda fought his invisible war, the world moved on without him. Japan became an economic superpower. Tokyo hosted the Olympic Games in 1964. Humans walked on the moon in 1969. The Beatles came and went. The Vietnam War came and went. Presidents were elected and assassinated. And Hiroo Onoda kept cleaning his rifle in the jungle. The Japanese government spent millions searching for Onoda. They sent expeditions. They dropped photographs of his family from aircraft. They broadcast messages over loudspeakers. Nothing worked. Onoda saw it all as elaborate enemy tricks. Then, in 1974, a 22-year-old Japanese student named Norio Suzuki arrived in the Philippines. Suzuki was not a soldier, not an official, not even a serious researcher. He was a drifter, an eccentric traveler. Before leaving Japan, Suzuki had told his friends he was going to find 3 things: Lieutenant Onoda, a wild panda, and the abominable snowman. In that order. He walked into the jungle, sat down under a tree, and waited. 4 days later, Onoda walked out to meet him. Suzuki told Onoda the war was over, that it had been over for 29 years. Onoda did not believe him, but he made an offer. If Suzuki could bring his original commanding officer, Major Taniguchi, to the jungle in person, and if Taniguchi personally rescinded the order, then Onoda would come out. Suzuki returned to Japan with photographs and the impossible story. The Japanese government tracked down Taniguchi. He was 69 years old. He had retired from military life decades earlier. He was now working as a bookstore clerk. Taniguchi agreed to fly to the Philippines. He put on his old military uniform, and he prepared to give the order that would end a war no one else knew was still being fought. On March 9th, 1974, Taniguchi walked into the jungle of Lubang Island. Onoda saw him from a distance, recognized him instantly, snapped to attention, saluted. Taniguchi read the official order.
Lieutenant Onoda, on behalf of the Japanese government and the Imperial Army, your mission is officially concluded. You are relieved of duty. You may go home.
Onoda listened in silence. When it was finished, he wept. For the first time in 29 years. He removed his rifle, removed his bayonet, removed his ammunition. He carried his samurai sword to the presentation ceremony the next day and offered it not to Taniguchi, but to Ferdinand Marcos, President of the Philippines. Marcos would later pardon Onoda for the 30 civilian deaths during his 29-year campaign. Hiroo Onoda returned to Japan. He was 51 years old. He had left as a 22-year-old officer. He had missed 29 years of everything. Thousands greeted him at Haneda Airport. Journalists, officials, ordinary citizens waving flags. He tried to smile, tried to answer questions, tried to thank people. But he looked lost, like a man who had arrived from another planet. The Japan Onoda returned to was not the Japan he had defended. The militaristic empire of 1944 had been replaced by a peaceful consumer society. Neon signs, popular music, baseball, business suits. He published a memoir. It became a bestseller. He donated all the royalties to the Yasukuni Shrine, which honors Japan's war dead. He kept nothing for himself. 2 years after his return, he could not adjust. He left Japan and emigrated to Brazil. He bought a cattle ranch in the Brazilian countryside. He learned Portuguese. He wore a cowboy hat. He worked with his hands. He had come home to find that home no longer existed. He had returned not to his country. He had returned to its ghost. Years later, Onoda read a newspaper report from Japan. A teenager had murdered his own parents. The country was in shock. Onoda was deeply disturbed. He believed Japanese youth had lost something essential: discipline, resilience, purpose. So he returned to Japan, not to adjust, but to teach. He founded a wilderness survival school for young people. He called it the Onoda Nature School. He taught teenagers how to build fires, how to find food, how to work together, how to endure. He had spent 29 years in the jungle to serve his country, and then he spent 40 more years trying to save it from itself. Hiroo Onoda died on January 16th, 2014, at the age of 91. Hiroo Onoda fought for 29 years. He never broke his order. He never surrendered. He never doubted his country. But he also killed 30 innocent people. He destroyed dozens of Filipino families, and he returned to a world that was not sure how to feel about him. Was he the last true samurai, or was he a prisoner of his own loyalty? History does not answer that question. It only remembers his name. Hiroo Onoda, 1922 to 2014. If you found his story worth knowing, subscribe. We tell one true story like this every week.